Your brain made most of your decisions today before you woke up. Not metaphorically, literally. The neuroscientist Benjamin Libet measured it in a lab. He asked people to move their hand whenever they felt like it, and to note the exact moment they consciously decided to do it. What he found was unsettling. The brain had already initiated the movement half a second before the person reported deciding anything at all. Half a second doesn't sound like much, but it means the decision came first, the awareness came second. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If your brain is deciding before you're aware of it, who exactly is making your choices? Most people spend their lives believing they are the authors of their actions. They wake up, choose what to eat, choose how to respond to an email, choose how to feel about a conversation that went badly. It feels like choice. It has the texture of choice, but there's a significant body of evidence suggesting that what we experience as deciding is often just the moment we become aware of something the brain had already set in motion, based on patterns, habits, and emotional memories formed years, sometimes decades earlier. David Eagleman, a neuroscientist at Stanford, estimates that upwards of 90 to 95% of brain activity happens below the level of conscious awareness. The conscious mind, in his framing, is less like a captain and more like a spokesperson, announcing decisions that were made in a back room it doesn't have access to. A Harvard study published in Science found that people spend nearly 47% of their waking hours thinking about something other than what they're actually doing. Almost half of your waking life, your mind is elsewhere, replaying, projecting, rehearsing. And the researchers found that this mind-wandering, not negative events, not difficult circumstances, was the single strongest predictor of unhappiness. The autopilot isn't just running your decisions, it's running your attention, your mood, your default experience of being alive. The first thing to understand is that the autopilot is not a flaw. When a behavior becomes habitual, the brain migrates it from the prefrontal cortex, which is slow, deliberate, energy-expensive, to the basal ganglia, which is fast, efficient, and operates below awareness. This is intelligent design. You don't want to consciously process how to walk so you can think about where you're going. Automation frees cognitive resources for genuinely new problems. The issue isn't that automation exists. The issue is that most people have never audited which programs are running. The second thing is that your past is making your present choices. Antonio Damasio, the neurologist behind the somatic marker hypothesis, showed that emotional memories don't just inform decisions, they pre-filter them. Before conscious reasoning even engages, the brain has already run the situation through an emotional archive built from everything that has ever happened to you. Certain options get ruled out before they reach awareness. Others get elevated. You think you're reasoning. You're actually remembering. This is why people find themselves in the same situations, the same relationships, the same emotional states over and over, despite genuinely wanting something different. The wanting is conscious, the choosing is not. The third thing, the loop has a specific structure. Raumsol, the founder of Logosophia, described something precise about the nature of the unexamined mind. He wrote that the thoughts of the lower mind rotate in circles by their very nature. That cyclicality is the default movement of a mind that hasn't been deliberately worked on. And that only the influx of superior thought, consciously cultivated, changes that circular motion into a spiral, something that moves upward instead of simply repeating. A circle goes nowhere. A spiral, even a slow one, goes somewhere. The autopilot is a circle. The question is whether you ever leave it. The fourth thing, you can't think your way out of it. This is where most people get stuck. They learn about the autopilot, they read the book, they watch the video, they feel the recognition, and they assume that awareness is the solution. It isn't. Not by itself. Neuroscience is clear on this. Insight does not rewire neural pathways. Understanding that you have a habit doesn't dissolve the habit. New patterns require new repeated experiences, deliberate, sustained, over time. The brain changes through what you do, not through what you understand. Patanjali knew this 2,000 years before the first neuroscience paper. The entire system of yoga he articulated is a technology against mental automaticity, not a belief system, a practice system. The Yoga Sutras open with the declaration that yoga is the stilling of the fluctuations of the mind. Not understanding them, not analyzing them, stilling them through repeated, disciplined practice. The Stoics knew it too. Epictetus didn't ask his students to understand the space between stimulus and response. He trained them to use it through daily exercises, written reflection, deliberate exposure to difficulty. The prohairesis, the ruling faculty of judgment, wasn't something you had. It was something you built. Here is the reframe that changes this from unsettling to useful. The fact that 90 to 95% of your behavior is automatic doesn't mean you are powerless. It means you have been spending your energy in the wrong place. Most self-improvement effort is aimed at the conscious 5%, at motivation, at decisions, at willpower in the moment, and that's exactly why it fails. You cannot out-decide a program that runs faster and deeper than your decisions. The leverage is not in the moment of choice. The leverage is in the design of the conditions that produce the choice. What you expose yourself to repeatedly becomes a pattern. What you practice becomes a program. What you build as an environment becomes the context that shapes your automatic responses before you're even aware there was a choice to make. The person who wakes up and immediately reaches for their phone hasn't made a decision. They've executed a program. The person who doesn't reach for their phone hasn't exercised willpower in that moment. They've designed their environment or their practice so that the default behavior is different. This is the shift, from managing behavior to designing patterns, from fighting the autopilot to choosing which programs get installed. There are 3 places where this actually changes. None of them are about willpower. First, create friction before the automatic behavior and ease before the intentional one. Your brain follows the path of least resistance. If the unhelpful program requires 1 step and the better one requires 5, the unhelpful one wins every time. Reverse that ratio. Put the phone in another room. Put the book on the pillow. Design your environment so the thing you want to become automatic is the easiest available option. Second, build a practice of noticing the gap, not analyzing it, not judging it, just noticing, for a fraction of a second, that an impulse is present before you act on it. Viktor Frankl described this as the space between stimulus and response. You don't need to change what you do immediately. You just need to make that space exist, because a choice that happens in 0 milliseconds is not a choice. A choice that happens after a breath might be. Third, take the repetition seriously. Whatever new pattern you want, whether it's a thought practice, a physical habit, a way of responding to conflict, it will not feel natural for a long time. That's not a sign it's not working. That's what the beginning of rewiring feels like. The brain requires repetition, not insight, not inspiration, repetition. You are not broken because you're running on autopilot. Every human being is. The difference isn't between people who have programs and people who don't. The difference is between people who have noticed and people who haven't yet. The loop isn't a life sentence, but leaving it requires more than knowing it exists. It requires building, deliberately and patiently, the kind of mind that can stand outside the first impulse and ask, "Is this me? Or is this the program?" That question, asked consistently enough, is the beginning of something different. When you look at your own day, is there a moment you can recognize where you weren't choosing, you were just running? Thank you for staying until the end. Your time is valuable, and I genuinely hope this was worth it. If this video left you with something, a thought, a shift, a question you didn't have before, a like helps it reach someone else who might need it too. And if you want to keep going, subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next one.